Welcome to the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, where we spend an hour each week exploring life-improving topics through a lens of alcohol recovery and the Sinclair Method. Every week, we take on a new question, topic, or common challenge to empower people to either build a better relationship with alcohol or to eliminate it completely. Episodes are filmed live on Twitch at twitch.tv/C3 Foundation, and the audience is encouraged to ask questions and engage with the host and guests. The Options Save Lives weekly stream is hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and is produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous sponsors. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Options Save Lives weekly live stream. As always, I'm Jenny Williamson, Executive Director at the C3 Foundation, and your host for the next hour. How is everybody today? And thank you for those resubscribes. I'm looking at the chat, and great to see that. So we are broadcasting live from the C3 Foundation office here in Fort Myers, Florida today. Love to hear where you guys are watching from. And if you're a first-timer to the stream, welcome. Make sure you let us know in the chat. This week, we are joined by the one and only Claudia Christian to continue our discussion that we started a few weeks back on how to support a loved one who is using the Sinclair Method. We first started the conversation back in January during our 9th episode of the season. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely refer back. It is up on our website. But it didn't take us very long in that episode to realize we were going to need a lot more than 1 hour to discuss this topic because it really is important. So please, if you have questions as we're talking, or if you have suggestions that have helped you personally, or if you're someone on the Sinclair Method and your significant other, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your parent, whomever that has supported you, if they did something that was really helpful, definitely put that in the chat. Let us know. Let us share that with the rest of our audience. And before we jump in, let me properly introduce our guest for today, just in case there's someone out there new to our channel and doesn't know who is at the head and at the helm of the C3 Foundation. So joining me today is our founder and CEO, Claudia Christian. Known in TSM circles as the most recognized advocate for the Sinclair Method, Claudia became a TSM activist in 2010 after using the method for her own drinking issue. She is the author of Babylon Confidential and Journeys, 2 books that show the power of the Sinclair Method. She launched the C3 Foundation, produced the award-winning documentary film One Little Pill, and delivered a powerful TEDx talk that's been seen about 3.5 million times. Claudia has also created the Your Sinclair Method coaching program for people on TSM after earning her certification as a National Certified Peer Recovery Support Specialist. Claudia continues to act in television and film and has an active voiceover career. She writes fiction novels and teaches cooking classes in her spare time, all while passionately fighting for the rights of people around the world with alcohol use disorder. So go ahead and say hi, Claudia.
Hi, Jenny. It's good to see you, and it's good to be back and talking about this incredibly important subject, which is supporting people on TSM, which is such a varied and widely discussed topic, and lots of different opinions, lots of fine lines between support and enabling, lots of things that we're going to dive into and discuss. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me again. And thank you for those of you in the audience for your suggestions and chiming in. It's good. I can't see you, but it's good to know you're out there.
And as always, we're going to start with an easy icebreaker. Now, everyone always wants to know, if you could go back in time and say something to your younger self, what would it be? But I'm going to flip the script a little bit here. If you stepped back in time and encountered your 13-year-old you and started talking about your present life, would your former self even really believe that it's you?
Oh, gosh, I doubt it, because I certainly never anticipated at 13 years old that I would end up becoming alcohol dependent. I mean, I just saw a straight line into acting and continuing my career acting and writing, which had, as we all know, a significant bump in that road, which led me here. So I don't know if I would have believed that at the time, since alcohol really didn't play a role in my immediate family, and there was no misuse at that point in my life, even with parents and siblings and stuff. So I probably would have been like, who is this girl talking about AUD? What the heck is that? TSM? I would have probably thought it was an alien or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my 13-year-old me would believe that my life is what it is either. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to just ask this question was because if you think about it out there, especially out in the audience, we have these versions of ourselves. Anybody who watches sci-fi or anything with time travel, there's that you go back in time and any tiny little mistake might completely change the entire future. And yet we stop and don't realize that what we do today affects our future. And we are capable of more change in our lifetime, both short and long term, than we ever give ourselves credit for. So I don't know if anyone would actually believe that their future self was them.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I mean, we all have so many twists and turns in this road of life and like you said, one decision to, have a baby or commit to somebody, the wrong or right partner. I mean, it can drastically change the trajectory of your life. So the lesson here, folks, is make decisions wisely. Don't be too spontaneous.
And remember that no matter how entrenched you feel in your life right now, you can change it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can change it, and you don't have to do big things to change it. It's all the little changes along the way that add up.
Yep.
So the last time we talked a bit about tough love and boundaries and why tough love was definitely not a good way to go, why there's no science behind it and things like that. And we tried to find some ways, mostly centering on things like communication, for ways to help a loved one who's on the Sinclair Method. But then we didn't really get into some of those really rough situations, the ones that typically come up on a regular basis, like when you're trying to support someone on the Sinclair Method and they start out really, really well and you're both getting excited. And then your loved one says, well, what if I just don't take my pill? And they stop, or they are considering stopping, following the medication protocol. And the question becomes, well, what can I do? And I hate that this even comes up because, Claudia, you've done multiple videos and blog posts and talked about it in Journeys about what happens when you stop taking medication.
When you stop taking the medication, you can relearn the compulsive drinking so quickly it'll make your head spin. And, I've been very transparent about my own lack of compliance in my 5th year on TSM. And I tell you, it's nothing that I want to wish on anybody, because it's just the process of feeling like a failure, feeling humiliated and shame again, when something was working so well for you, Why would you fall into this? Why would you do it? And this is the fallibility of human beings. And I do believe strongly, and I always use this analogy, but it makes sense. I think that there is that little teeny thing, even when you've reached extinction, there's still a little part of that lizard, as I call it, in the brain that's whispering to try and trip you up. And that's the one thing, is when you get cocky or you get too confident and you go, oh, I want to be spontaneous, or you have to be hyper aware of the fact that all this lizard wants, as I say and say again, is for you to be in a gutter with a brown paper bag of alcohol. It's all it wants. So it will try to manipulate you into drinking without the medication. And it is up to you to talk back to it. As I've said before, I used to talk out loud to it and say, no, I'm not going to drink before the hour's up. Get out of my face, and I would articulate that out loud. But for a loved one to see that this method is working for the individual, and then the individual starts creating havoc with it, saying, oh, I only waited 40 minutes. You really have to stop at that point without making excuses. Just stop whatever you're doing and sit the person down. And I think really talk with love in your heart about why, and remind them how much their drinking has decreased, how proud you are of them, how much better their relationships are, their work is, how much better they feel, how much better they look. Do this with love in your heart and say, now why? Just explain to me why you're even thinking of drinking without the medication, please, so I understand. And I think that's a really great starting point, as opposed to immediately going to, why would you do that? The anger is going to provoke that thought process from that nasty old lizard again by saying, you see, he or she's already disappointed in you. You might as well drink, so that's a trigger. You don't want to trigger the individual, but you definitely want to confront it head on immediately with love.
And this is really interesting because what I know in several of our peer groups, a lot of times a family member or supporter will come in simply because their loved one who is on the Sinclair Method either doesn't use social media or doesn't want to be involved in a peer group. And so sometimes those family members are in the peer groups by proxy. And so there is a difference. Talk a little bit about the difference of when a loved one says, "What are you thinking?" as opposed to when, and I see this all the time, and I do love it when I see it in the peer groups. On a peer-to-peer basis, someone will say, I was wondering, has anyone ever thought about trying this without taking the pill first? And everybody comes in and says, oh my God, I did that and that was bad. It was bad. Don't consider it. Oh my gosh. But talk about how that's different when it's coming from your loved one as opposed to when it's coming from a peer who has shared the same struggle, because there is a difference in the reception. So talk about that a little bit.
There's a huge difference in the reception. Listen, our loved ones have seen us at our worst. We feel guilt associated with our relationships. I know that I was tiptoeing through life for the longest period of time because all I had in my mind was memories of mistakes I had made, things I had said, embarrassing incidents. And so you have all that history with that loved one. And also a lot of these loved ones are the people who triggered you to drink in the first place. So if you get judginess or shame provoking feelings from that individual, you're more prone to not only ignore it, but your brain shuts down because you're used to that. So you're not really hearing it. All you're hearing is, oh, I've disappointed you again. Oh, you're angry at me again. And when a peer says it to you, a peer who's been there, it's like when I say to somebody, there's absolutely no judgment coming from me because I've done it. And I'm telling you from experience, don't do it. It's the worst thing you can do. Why ruin a great thing? You've got everything going for you. You got your life back. Why screw around with medication adherence? But it's that weird little thing in our human brains of testing things, especially when something is working for us. It's like a diet. Somebody's doing great on a diet and then they say, I'm going to add this, even though the plan says absolutely no grapefruit. They'll say suddenly they want grapefruit. It's just this human condition of we don't like being told what to do. And there's a certain population of individuals who really don't like being told what to do. So they try and manipulate it and make it their own. The Sinclair method is really, really basic. You have to take the medication. You have to wait the full hour. You can't fudge it. You can't make it your own. You can't customize this plan. So I think when a loved one would come in, for instance, I believe if somebody would have said to me, instead of, I bet you didn't take your pill, or you didn't, or any accusatory kind of strong worded accusation, I think instead of that, if you sit the person down and say, I've been in the peer support groups, and it seems like a lot of people have had this challenge. And when they did not comply with the medication, it was pretty disastrous for a lot of them. So you might even want to say, as a loved one, say, perhaps it would help you to go into the peer support groups. Or do you want me to read some of the comments? Do you want me to share the issue for you if they can't use social media? Or say, can we go in together and look at this? Because it seems like you're not alone, that a lot of people have not complied, and it was really, really not a great thing for them. So maybe this will help you learn the repercussions of it, or what happens to your brain is that, you have alcohol without the protection of naltrexone, and suddenly you drink more than ever. And I don't want that for you. And you can say, I just don't want you to have to start over because you're doing so well. You always have to bring it back to, you're doing so well, and I'm so proud of you. And I'm so filled with gratitude that you're doing this for your family, for yourself. And I've seen such a remarkable positive change in you. And once again, keep going back to those things. You look so much better. You're so much calmer. Your anxiety is better. Remind them, because when you're still in it, it's really hard to see these profound changes that are occurring. I had a client recently who said to me, I'm just not seeing any difference. And it's been a year and a half. And I said, sweetie, when you came to me, you were drinking every night, 9 drinks a night. You're only drinking 2 days a week now, 3 drinks. Do you not see that in a year and a half, you've gone from a daily drinker that was binge drinking pretty much to someone who's a social drinker? And so you just don't see it. And that your loved one perhaps is not seeing these profound changes. They don't see the bags that are gone under their eyes, the better sleep that they're having, the fact that they're laughing more. You can even say, you seem so much lighter and happier. Just always go for the positive first, even if it's killing you inside to say, why would you not comply? Just stop and breathe yourself and be the calm one that comes from a place of love. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, I think remembering that we are all our own worst critic, and that when someone is already feeling the shame and guilt of addiction, that own worst critic can be compounded. And I think it is really important for family members and loved ones who are trying to support someone on the Sinclair method to tap into, if nothing else, that level of empathy. And remember, know how negatively you can speak to yourself, and know that your loved one is probably speaking twice as harshly to him or herself. And that by pulling them out of that, because it is so common to hear people who not only have seen progress, but have seen amazing progress, say, well, I don't think this is working. I don't know that there's any difference because last night I overdrank. And it's like, last night doesn't erase the 50 to 70% drop you've already had. The added AF days, alcohol-free days. And sometimes we just need someone outside of ourselves to actually remind us that we're doing okay.
Which is why the drink log is so important. And you can see it in black and white, but also the loved ones. And I understand if you're suddenly seeing someone do so well, and this is the scariest thing that I see. They're doing really, really well on it. And then you can tell their drinking ticks up and they start to hide again, and they're clearly not complying. Where do you go from there? And at that point, do you make excuses for them with other people, or do you confront the issue head on? And that's the fine line between enabling or actually participating in the person's recovery in a positive manner. And I think once you see that very scary issue, which comes up all the time in our peer support, in loved one support groups, is that it is extremely important to take the person aside and say, listen, you were doing really, really well, but I've seen a profound difference in the last week. And I'm not judging you. I'm not provoking you. I don't want to start an argument over this, but have you been complying? I think that's a reasonable question, because you're seeing this marked difference in the individual.
And it's also important because they may be going, they may be following the protocol perfectly.
Yeah.
And simply experiencing what is ironically called spontaneous recovery. In Pavlov's extinction theory, spontaneous recovery, which is completely different from addiction recovery, is when, for no apparent reason, the original behavior flares back. A lot of people will call this the lizard brain fighting back, or an extinction burst, or other things that the lingo kind of gets called. But it's actually can be a normal part of the process, and it's that last ditch effort for the addiction to try to fight through and regain ground. And whenever someone experiences this and stays compliant, not only is it a very short period of time, but after they get through that period, the drinking dramatically drops off.
Yeah.
Suddenly and dramatically. And so it can be insanely scary for loved ones, but it can also be terrifying for the person who really honestly believes this is their last ditch chance at recovery. And if TSM doesn't work for them, nothing will. So you're scared. They're scared.
Mm-hmm.
If they're being compliant, you can at least assure them that it's part of the process. You can be there to say, this happens. Yes, it's scary. You can share your fear with them. Definitely communicate it. Say you're also afraid, but that you know that you together, as long as they keep taking the pill, waiting the hour, and following all of the instructions, they'll get through it. And when they do, they'll be better for it.
And this is also a really terrific time to get even closer in your support for their recovery by saying, this is something that I've heard about, and it does happen to people, but is there any other outside influences that might be going on? Did somebody trigger you? Are you drinking just to self-medicate, or are you still being mindful? And, let's talk about it, because it's a learning experience for the future. Because believe me, if you don't break the habits early on, and if you don't do these things, your drinking will uptick through the years, because you're not changing the way you use alcohol. If you're still using it every time you see your mother-in-law because you can't stand her, you got to stop that vicious cycle, and you have to communicate with your mother-in-law and say, your behavior triggers me to want to drink. You have to have conversations. This is part of recovery. It's not just getting rid of the biological issues of addiction. It's about growing as a human being and changing your behavior. So you cannot continue to rely on alcohol forever. And if you include your loved ones in there and say, God, I had a really crap day, my first instinct is to want to have a drink, your loved one can say, why don't we take a brisk walk first? And then if you want to still drink, you can take your pill and wait an hour. But now we've delayed it by a half an hour. So you as a loved one, you're learning TSM tricks and tips to include in your partners or your sons or daughters or parents' recovery, which is wonderful. You're part of the recovery. The thing is that I think there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around it. So people kind of want to say, oh, she's on this method, let's just leave her be, because now we don't have to think about Claudia anymore. That really was what I found, was that everyone's like, oh, okay, she's doing better. Shoot, let's not talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk about the reasons why Claudia was drinking. Nobody wanted to dig any deeper, because there was just so much shame and awkwardness and humiliation surrounding the whole incident of becoming addicted to alcohol. So instead of that, what I'm hoping for people, because I was doing this in the dark ages of TSM, now that there's so much support available and there's so much peer support, and loved ones can learn about how to support somebody, I'm hoping that there's more communication. That's how we grow, and that's how the person will have a more full and robust recovery. They won't just be popping a pill and waiting an hour. They'll be communicating their needs.
And I think that segues into a topic that somehow managed to miss my list, but I know we talked about it ahead of time. And that's, we spend a lot of time encouraging people who are using the Sinclair Method to build the version of their lives that their best version of them, that they see themselves in. And so many people come to the Sinclair Method because they want to be a normal drinker. But in reality, I think that what they really want for normal is a normal life that isn't completely encapsulated by either thinking about alcohol, drinking alcohol, or thinking about trying to recover from alcohol. And so we encourage people to build those not just better habits around alcohol, but better habits around life, better communication skills, pick up hobbies that make them happy. And so this is something that we tell people on the Sinclair Method is critical, because it's not just about recovery. It's about quality of life and empowerment to build that quality of life. So let's talk a little bit about how that can be difficult when you're supporting someone on the Sinclair Method. And in the beginning, they're like, hey, yes, I want you to ask me if I've taken my pill. Yes, I want you to check up on various things. And then they start to shift gears and they're like, well, I don't want everything to be about TSM. I don't want everything to be about my recovery. So I don't necessarily want you to ask me and follow up on that. So let's talk about how that shift can be navigated by support systems who might find that scary.
Well, let's face it. In traditional treatment, you're in recovery for life. You're going to AA meetings, or you're popping back into rehab, or you've got your smart recovery, and it's constant. With TSM, you can leave your drinking problem behind, especially if you choose abstinence eventually. You're not taking the medication anymore because you're not drinking anymore. So why do you want to keep talking about it? But the people who've dramatically reduced their drinking on TSM, and I know this myself, I got to the point where I was like, I don't need someone to ask me if I took my pill. I'm done. I've reached extinction. I'm happy. I have a healthy relationship with alcohol, and I'm done with that phase. And for me, it was just sort of a natural progression. My partner, my then partner, just sort of stopped asking me, because it was kind of ridiculous at that point. It was like year 4, and it's like, no, I got this. But that can be scary, especially if you're with somebody 24/7. If you have a lifetime partner, or this is a parent that you desperately love, you see them all the time. You might be, and then you see your dad drinking a beer, and you might just say, okay, I know he's been on this for 3 years and he looks really great and everything, but did he take his pill? That's your own issue of years and years and years of watching your dad be drunk, or all the childhood trauma that you endured from the drinking. And it's really hard. It's really hard to see a person that you love engaging in the activity that scarred you. It's really difficult. But you have to understand that if their choice is to be a social drinker, and that if they're safely drinking within the guidelines, and that they're complying with the medication, it's up to you now to accept this new version of the individual. And that can be a very difficult thing. And once again, all it takes is a loving conversation. It takes addressing the issue and saying, look, you've been on this for 3 years and you're doing really, really well. I feel kind of weird when we go out now for dinner, because I used to ask you if you took your medication. Is that annoying now? Does it trigger you? Or do you want me to keep asking you? That's it. Do it with humor, with love. Just do it. We have to talk. Human beings, we close down so often, and that's when things happen. That's when misunderstandings occur. That's when people get touchy. You just have a simple, loving conversation. Do you want me to keep asking if you took your pill, or do you have that? And then, no, I've got it. I've been on it for 4 years, silly. Okay, great. Let's go out.
And,
Done.
If you're especially for spouses or for live-in significant others, you do have your own set of triggers and your own set of traumas that surround your loved one's drinking. But in addition to your loved one building the life that they want their best version to be, my suggestion is look at what your best version of your relationship is. What does that look like? And if your loved one who's on the Sinclair Method is trying to do normal and they're trying to shift focus away from TSM, if they're still following the protocol, this is such a great opportunity for the two of you to build your new normal together. Mm-hmm. This is such a great opportunity to grow together. So instead of trying to hold on to your wish to oversee and control and ensure and to be that safety net, shift from being supporter and safety net to more back to being the partner that you wanted to be when you first got into the relationship, because that window that got closed from your loved one's alcohol use is opening again. And this is a great time to start building together what that best version of your relationship is.
Yeah. And I don't think, it really depends on the relationship. And it depends on the individual, obviously, but you can feel out people about their goals as well. I mean, I think a conversation about goals is great. I remember when I was in the beginning of TSM, it felt good for me to be able to say to my partner at the time, in a perfect world, I'd like to just have maybe 2 glasses of wine. That was this is when I was tentatively not completely trusting everything about TSM in the beginning of my process. And just articulating that was helpful. And then without him being judgy, if I say a 3rd glass, what I would say is I would turn to him and say, you know what, I think I might have a 3rd. So I was conscious, and unbeknownst to me, I was being mindful, but by just expressing my desire for each drink. That means I was being mindful about deciding whether I was going to have another one or not. And then afterwards I would say, wow, I feel really good that I only had XYZ. So it was always a running conversation for me, because I was sort of blown away by the miracle that is TSM, that I wasn't hiding or lying or sneaking up to the bar, ordering more behind his back or anything like that. So, and for both of us, it was a learning experience. So I think there are ways, depending on the personality type, and your partner better than anybody, there's ways to approach all of this with excitement and enlightenment and joy, and saying, wow, I don't even feel like having a hard alcohol drink. That's great. Why don't we have beer, or whatever, that make it just, once again, it all comes down to communication, everything.
Well, let's switch slightly to one that is a different kind of communication, and it's a communication that centers around some self-care. And so talk a little bit about some of the ways a supporter can navigate when they recognize they have their own triggers and traumas surrounding their loved one's drinking. When they know that, yes, they support the person, but it's still very trying to see them drinking, even though they know it's going to help. So talk about some of the things loved ones can do in that situation.
Well, from personal experience, and everybody is different, I found it very difficult in the first few years to talk about my behaviors while I was drinking, my bad behaviors, with loved ones. So in other words, once I started on TSM, everyone thought, oh, she's better. Now I can bring up that time in Mexico when she made an ass of herself, and that was really hurtful to me and triggered me to want to drink more, even though I was on TSM and I was doing better. people would suddenly barrage me with all this stuff is like, oh, good, that's working for you. You remember the time you were on the boat and you fell off? And it's like, I'm not ready to relive that. I know it was traumatic for you, but it was traumatic for me too.
Would you,
and I
would you equate that to somebody who has just broken their leg and they have a cast and their crutches so they can move around, and someone expects them to run a marathon because they're doing better because they can move around themselves now?
It's sort of like that, but it's also with the added component of listen, I'm only getting the biological issue sorted right now. I am still filled with shame and embarrassment and trauma from my own drinking. I'm not ready for you guys to all gang up on me and tell me what a jerk I was for the past 5 years. That's not helpful. I haven't even dealt with that stuff myself. So it's not helpful to suddenly treat the person like, oh, everything's fine just because they're drinking less. They have internal trauma. You have internal trauma from their drinking. But you have to understand that the person who is doing the drinking also has trauma that's not dealt with. They're just dealing with cravings and reducing drinking right now. So what my suggestion is to find someone else to discuss that with, not the individual who's on TSM. Find somebody else, whether it's they have Al-Anon meetings. They have, I'm sure, other LifeRing and Smart Recovery probably have meetings for loved ones as well.
Well, they're trying to get some TSM-centered loved one meetings back up in the weekly Zoom mix. Yes. But I don't know that if they've got that together yet. But
even talking to a friend or another relative or somebody about your own feelings about it is far healthier than talking about it with the person on TSM. Please don't weigh that on them as well. Like, oh, when you were drinking last year, it really scared me. I understand you're in pain, and I understand that's really important to you to communicate. But if you lay that guilt on top of someone who's just in the beginning of their recovery on TSM, it's a lot to handle. Those are conversations that can eventually be approached when the person is a little bit further down the line in their recovery.
And then talk about the value to the loved one in finding a coach or a therapist to deal with those triggers, because depending on the length of time that alcohol has been an issue, this support system might even have some complex PTSD around this, may want to actually seek a professional depending on the amount of time, or where maybe if it's not that ingrained, how talking to a coach might help to work through some of those triggers and issues.
Listen, there's grief counseling. There's free meetings all over the world. And in a way, you did lose something when the person was drinking. You lost that part of the relationship. It was like a mini death. So you can find free meetings. You can find a good therapist. You can find a good friend. You can join a women's or men's group for loss, for grief, because this is considered, when your loved one gets taken by addiction, you literally lost them to addiction. And now that you have them back, it's very common to not trust that. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for that ball to drop. You're just, it's too good to be true is something I hear all the time. Oh, I'm so, the person is not embracing the recovery at all, because they're like, well, he's reduced his drinking a tremendous amount, but I don't trust it. I don't trust him. I don't trust the process, or I know something bad's going to happen. All this projection, negativity. You as the loved one need to deal with that, because that, believe me, it's palpable. I remember not wanting to even be around people who were convinced that TSM was snake oil and it was just a sham and that I was going to relapse and die, and that was just there. And I could feel it when I was around them. They were looking at me in this sort of judgy kind of, yeah, right, we'll see you in rehab, honey, that kind of thing. And it was really detrimental and negative. It had a really bad effect on me emotionally to feel that negativity coming from somebody. So if you're feeling that as the loved one, it really is, I don't want to say your responsibility, but it would be great for you to seek help. And that is a byproduct of self-care, is seeing a therapist, joining a group of like-minded people. I've attended a lot of Al-Anon meetings in my life with friends who are the children of alcoholics. And there can be some nuggets of good stuff if you find the right meeting. It's a place to explore these feelings. I'm sure there's lots of online meetings that also can help you in that regard. The most important thing is to try and deal with that trauma on your own time and with other people, and to not lay that on the person who's desperately trying to recover.
And that really goes right into the next thing, is even among people who understand the Sinclair Method and really they do support their loved one using the method. You mentioned trust, and we hear this a lot. I've been lied to about alcohol so many times in the past that I don't know how to trust his or her medication adherence.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And we've discussed this. And every time I coach somebody, it's a different scenario. I do coach couples. Some couples find that, if the person on TSM texts them and says, I'm taking my medication now, I intend to have a drink when I get home, that helps build trust. Other couples say, they want to see them take it right in front of them because they've had non-compliance issues in the past. That's something you've got to work out together with love and with communication. There are extremes. There are people who say, no, you cannot do it unless I see you take the tablet, and then you absolutely have to drink in front of me. We've talked about this before, Jenny, that can trigger someone to just go take their car and go off and drink by themselves, or it can create a really healthy environment if it's done with love, where the person feels protected and taken care of and cared for. And that's the difference in how do you communicate this? How do you present this? Say, listen, I know this is my problem, but I love you and I trust you as a human being, but I don't trust addiction. I don't trust that little lizard. And I know how wily it can be. And I want to help support you in any way I can. But if I'm being honest, this whole thing scares me a bit too. So how can we do this together? That's the big key. How can we do this together? What can I do to support you? How can I support you on TSM? And if you ask the person on TSM that, if somebody would have asked me that, how can I support you on TSM? That would have opened me up to say, hey, you know what? I like it when you ask if I've taken my medication, because now it's out in the open. Makes me feel normal. And some people might say, I don't like it when you ask me that. You've got to trust that I am taking it because I really want to recover. I want to get better.
And then there's a third option that you might hear. I don't know. I don't actually know how you can help me.
Yeah.
And even though that's not an easy answer, there's no clear pathway. If your loved one is willing to say, I don't know how you can help me, that's a moment of vulnerability. Like, we're just not, as a species, wired to admit that we don't know things.
Yeah,
and so, yeah, if you hear, I don't know, I would think that something along the lines of, well, then we'll figure it out together. And just reassure that, you understand that how you can support best may differ from time to time. And just let them know that however that changes or whatever they need, that you're willing to try. Because, and I really can't stress this enough to those of you out there who really do want to support fully a person who is on the Sinclair Method. For every one of you out there, for every person like your loved one who is getting your support, there are probably hundreds of people whose support system is completely against them doing anything other than stopping drinking right now. And there are people out there who would just kill to have any shred of support, even if it's not perfect support. And you got to remember that you don't have to be perfect in your support. And that the person that you love who is using the Sinclair method is probably not going to be perfect either, but that's okay for both of you. And there's a comment in the chat here, and I want to read part of it because for anyone who's watching this outside of Twitch and doesn't see the comments, I think this is really important. And this person says that she was a closet drinker and hiding it. And when she openly drank a glass of wine in front of her husband, it was really weird for her. So as a loved one, remember that if it's weird for you and scary for you to see your loved one drinking, even compliantly, it's kind of weird for them too. So you're in it together.
Yeah.
It's not always comfortable. In fact, it's usually uncomfortable for a person on the Sinclair method to make these changes that seem like they should be easy. Yeah, okay, well, I'm not going to hide it. I'm just going to drink it in front of you. But that's still a change, and that's hard.
It's huge.
And it feels weird.
Yeah, but you have to normalize it. And that would be okay for that woman's husband to say, I think it's really healthy that you're not hiding it or drinking in the pantry anymore. And, this makes it feel kind of normal. There was a woman that reached out to me and she said that her husband's on TSM and, the beer was in the fridge. And she said something really, really interesting to him. She said, sweetie, because she's always on a perpetual diet. She said, when I keep the cookies in plain view, it ruins my diet. Because I'm tempted to eat the cookies. So would it help you if I put the beer in the garage? And so you don't see it every time you open up the fridge looking for a sandwich meat or something like that. And he said, no, because I want to feel normal and I don't want to hide it. But the fact that she recognized that and said, does it trigger you like chocolates or cookies triggers me if I see them? And he said, no, because I want to be normal. And normal people keep the beer in the fridge with the milk. It doesn't have to be in the garage hidden from the alcoholic. So, but that was a great moment where she was being caring and loving. And he expressed his feelings of saying, I just want to feel normal and I'm drinking normally. And no, when I go for orange juice in the morning, I'm seeing the beer, but I'm not triggered to drink because naltrexone has gotten rid of my cravings. And I'm reveling in the fact that I can see the beer and I don't want the beer.
And it goes about 50-50 on that. I see people who that is absolutely the way they're going and they feel most comfortable and confident on their TSM journey. And I've seen people who say, listen, I still know that I haven't worked on all of the triggers and cravings and habits. And so I know that if I am going to only drink 3 beers tonight, that I need to only start with 3 beers in the house.
Let's put them in the garage and make an effort to walk out there to get it. Yeah, everybody's different. But the whole point of that was asking.
Exactly.
And recognizing. Yeah.
Yeah, and because it could go either way.
Yeah, and also the more you talk about it, the more you make it normal. That's another thing that I really disliked is all of my loved ones just sort of didn't talk about anything. It was like, oh, thank God it's covered now. We don't have to discuss it, but that's very old, sort of puritanical, old school family where it's like, we just don't discuss those things. So once again, as a loved one, if you really want to be key in the support of your loved one on TSM, it's really about normalizing it. The only way we normalize things in life is to discuss them as if they're normal. And this is normal. This is part of life. Addiction, substance misuse, compulsive drinking, overdoing it one night. It's just something that happens and we need to have loving conversations around all of this.
So we only have about 5 or 6 more minutes of content time left. So this is the hardest question. It's probably the hardest question we've ever had to ever consider or look at. And that's, do I stay or do I go?
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's it. I've dealt with this question so many times. Like I have one woman in particular whose husband has relapsed so many times on TSM, and she's just done. It's been 6 years of great highs and the worst lows. And as we know, Jenny, people who go off of it, they will relearn the drinking potentially even heavier than before. And that's what happened to this individual. And there just came a time when she felt like, I'm in my 30s. This is not the life I want. And I've done my best, and I love him, but I can't go through this again. And it was difficult, but she chose for her own personal health and safety to leave. And it's really hard when you love somebody.
It is. It's hard when, and I think we're built for mutually exclusive situations. And so people get in their mind that if I leave, that means I don't support them. I don't care about them. It is entirely possible to still love someone, to still wish for the best for them, but to know that your life is your life and you are under no obligation to stay with any other human being for any reason whatsoever. And if the relationship is toxic to you, it might be that it's toxic for them as well, because I've never seen a one-sided toxic relationship.
Right.
And you're not helping yourself or them. Or if there's abuse, you've got to protect yourself. Abuse doesn't come from alcohol. It can be amplified by it.
Yeah. I mean, it's so frustrating as a loved one to see this miracle and see it working for someone, and then the person goes off of it. And I know that it just breaks my heart, because I know how frustrating it must be for that individual, because it seems like this is the holy grail, the answer to all of our problems, and now you're not doing it correctly. Why would you do that? And once again, it comes down to, you don't love me enough to comply. It's the same sort of thought process as, you love alcohol more than me, which is not understanding the insidiousness of addiction. That's the key. And as I said in the very beginning of this talk, there will be times when that lizard whispers to somebody, you don't need to take the pill, be spontaneous. It's so complicated, and it's so difficult to understand how insidious addiction is. That when that happens, if it happens once and you've supported them to get back on TSM, that's a different story. But if it's happening consistently and the person is lying about it and they're still caught up in all of that drama, it might be time to reconsider it. And then they'll argue, well, what do you mean? We have children. I can't leave. We don't have the money for me to move out, blah, blah, blah. Then you might have to consider something radical, like the shot or the implant. I don't know. I mean, if there are so many different levels of this frustration, and what do I choose? Do I choose to leave, or do I demand them to try a different method?
Well, and then there's the demanding doesn't usually work from people. Demanding usually will only net you a short-term reprieve. And
but what if you were that person who constantly relapsed, and I said, with love in my heart, you know what, sweetheart, I love you and I want to stay with you. Clearly the tablet, you're incapable of complying. So would you consider another method? At least then the person's coming from love, saying, right, can we think of it? Would you consider maybe another way of treating your alcoholism?
Which is a lot different from what a lot of people out of instinct will do, which will say, listen, you either need to follow this protocol, get the shot, or I'm gone. Yes. And delivering ultimatums like that, that's not delivering concern out of love.
No, it's a whole different ball of wax. And the person who's drinking will probably go, oh yeah, well, watch this.
Right.
Yeah. And because it's your defense mechanism. You don't love me. You're not showing me love. So I'm just going to kill myself by drinking myself to death. So it's, listen, and I don't think, Jenny, or, and I know I am not, we're not making this sound easy, because it's not.
No, it's
It's
not.
a complicated issue here, and each individual situation is unique. And there's so many components. There's the in-laws and the children and this ex-wife I mean, there's so much going on. Or just friends who are heavy drinkers, or friends who are sober. Pressure from everybody. And that's why this is why we took 2 episodes to talk about supporting people on TSM, because there are so many different variants that will affect the outcome and will affect your ability to support the individual. So we have to take everything into consideration. Are you in a healthy place to support anybody in the first place? How are you doing? And can you support them without rancor or malice or anger in your voice? And if you can't, do something about that first before you try and support somebody. Do you have the tools it takes for self-care? Do you have the tools it takes to communicate in a loving manner? All of these things are just the basic beginnings. And now you throw in life and work and family. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to break down into one simple formula.
And at the risk of overflowing our 1 hour allotted time,
yes.
I do want to offer just one flip side to the folks who are on the Sinclair Method. If you have someone in your life who is making an attempt to be supportive, again, you're not going to be perfect on TSM. They are probably not going to be perfect in their support. Try not to meet their imperfections in their support with aggression. I do see that a lot, where people will say, you know, my husband or my wife said something last night and it just really rubbed me the wrong way and I'm feeling like they're judging me. And people will respond, well, screw them. Screw them. If they don't support you. And stop and recognize and ask yourself one key question. Does your loved one who is supporting you want you to get better?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, communication will get you through this. If the answer is no, if you honestly don't feel that your partner wants you to get better, that is an entirely different scenario. But if you can say yes, you know your husband, wife's boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever does want to see you get better, let them know how they can better support you, because they're not going to be able to figure it out unless you talk to them as well. So when they are imperfect, don't think that means they're not supporting you at all. Just let them know that, you know, a good way to start. I know you think you're helping here. I know you're trying to help me. But what you've said, what you did, it's not helpful, and this is why. Instead, could you do this for me? Because that would be what I would find more helpful.
Yeah. Good idea. Good words, Jenny.
So, everybody, we are definitely out of time. We are over time, but yeah, again, Claudia and I could talk about this for a 10-hour stream, but we're not going to do that to you guys. We're not going to do it to us. Audience, you guys have been fantastic as always, and thank you for spending the last hour with us. Would love to see any advice that you're taking from today's episode dropped in that chat box, because that would be wonderful to see. Please join me in thanking our wonderful guest, Claudia Christian, and fill the chat area with gratitude for Claudia. If you guys came in late, if you want to share this or watch the stream again, we're going to have today's video up on our website, YouTube, Vimeo, Anchor, and Spotify, all by the end of today. And then as soon as we're able to, we'll get those transcripts and closed captioning added as well. Next week, we're going to be joined by Danny L. from Your Sinclair Method Coaching. Danny's going to talk with us about how to deal with boredom in recovery. And it's also going to be quite a bit different from our typical weekly stream, with a special location and time. So next week, I'll be at the ASAM annual conference, and we will be broadcasting from my laptop, old school, from the American Society of Addiction Medicine host hotel in Hollywood, Florida. And since Danny is calling in from Australia, we're actually going to be live at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in Australia, that'll be 9:30 a.m. AWST. If you have found value in this broadcast, we hope you'll hit the donate button in our profile or head to our website and make a donation at c3foundation.org/donate. You can follow our channel to get broadcast alerts, subscribe to go ad-free, and you'll get some bonus emoji like those little love hearts that are popping up all over our stream chat for Claudia right now. So if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can even subscribe for free. If you'd like to suggest a guest or topic for a future broadcast, we've got a link to a Google form that's been dropping in the chat, and it's on the main schedule page of our website. If you're on the Sinclair Method and looking for more peer support, or if you just want to join the C3 Foundation community, we have you covered with groups on Facebook, Discord, and the Options Save Lives forum. That's it for today, everybody. Thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend. Be gentle with yourself and with others, and we will see you again next week at a very odd late time. So, bye, everybody. You've been watching the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous supporters. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org. If you have a question you want answered live on air, to make guest suggestions, or to support the show, let us know. You can reach us through our website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or on Discord. Join us each week as we continue to discuss more ways to help you build a better relationship with alcohol, or to eliminate it completely. Because recovery from alcohol use disorder is not a one-size-fits-all process. Options are available, and options save lives.